When most people in the modern world picture an angel, they imagine something specific, a gentle, luminous being, perhaps a beautiful human form with large white wings folded gracefully behind its back, a soft light emanating from the body, a peaceful expression, the kind of being that comforts you, guides you gently, perhaps sits on your shoulder whispering good advice. This image is so deeply embedded in popular culture that it appears in greeting cards, tattoos, Christmas decorations, and the names of sports teams. It feels safe, warm, familiar, and reassuring. It has almost nothing to do with the angels described in the Bible. If you read every single encounter with angels recorded across both the Old and New Testaments carefully in the original languages, paying close attention to what the text actually says rather than what artists and holiday card manufacturers have taught you to expect, you will find something that is deeply, fundamentally different from the cherubic figures of popular imagination. And perhaps the single most revealing detail in all of these accounts is this: every time a genuine angel appeared to a human being in the biblical narrative, the very first thing it said was always the same two words: do not be afraid. Those words are not a greeting. They are not the opening line of a pleasant conversation. They are an emergency instruction issued to someone who has just experienced a physiological crisis, because the people who received those words in the biblical record were not gently moved or mildly startled. They were terrified, collapsed, shaking, unable to function. The presence of these beings was so overwhelming, so completely outside the range of ordinary human experience, that the standard human response was total physical incapacitation. And if you look carefully at what these beings were actually described as, rather than what art and tradition have turned them into, the terror makes complete sense. Let us begin with the cherubim. This is a word most English speakers associate with chubby baby angels, the little winged infants that appear in Renaissance paintings floating around in clouds. The cherubim of the Bible are something else entirely. When God drove Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden, He placed cherubim at the eastern entrance with a flaming sword that flashed back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. Not chubby babies, beings wielding flaming weapons, guardians so formidable that no human being could pass them. The Ark of the Covenant, the most sacred object in Israel's religious life, was built with two golden cherubim on top, their wings spread upward and their faces toward each other. But these golden figures were not decorative choices by an artist with a fondness for baby imagery. They were representations of the actual beings whose full presence was so concentrated with divine holiness that they had to be depicted in gold rather than rendered in their actual form, because their actual form would have been incomprehensible to the human craftsman trying to build them. Now let us look at Ezekiel's vision, recorded in the first chapter of his book. Ezekiel was a priest who had been taken into exile in Babylon, and one day by the Kibar River he saw the heavens open, and what he saw took him approximately 15 verses to describe, not because he was being thorough, but because human language was not built for what he was trying to describe. He saw 4 living creatures coming out of a storm cloud of fire. Each of them had a human form, but with 4 faces. The face of a human on the front, the face of a lion on the right, the face of an ox on the left, and the face of an eagle on the back. Each had 4 wings. 2 wings spread upward, and 2 wings covered their bodies. Their legs were straight, their feet like the hooves of a calf, gleaming like burnished bronze. Under their wings were human hands on all 4 sides. They moved together in perfect synchronization, never turning as they changed direction. They moved like lightning. They burned like coals of fire, with torches of fire moving among them. The fire was bright, and lightning flashed out of it. Then Ezekiel describes what accompanied these creatures. Beside each one was a wheel on the earth, but not an ordinary wheel. This is where the description becomes genuinely strange. The wheels had a wheel intersecting the wheel. When the creatures moved, the wheels moved with them in any direction, without the wheels turning. And the rims of the wheels, all 4 rims, were full of eyes all around, eyes on the wheels, eyes everywhere, on the rims, covering the surface of the wheels in every direction, watching in every direction simultaneously, missing nothing. Above the creatures was something like a vast expanse of ice, crystal clear, terrifying to look at, and above that was something like a throne of lapis lazuli, and seated on the throne was a figure like a human being, surrounded above and below by the radiance of a rainbow, blazing with fire, brilliant and glorious beyond description. When Ezekiel saw all of this, his response was immediate and total. He fell on his face, not in a carefully choreographed act of reverence. He collapsed. The vision was more than his body could remain upright for, but Ezekiel's encounter, as overwhelming as it was, is not the most terrifying angelic encounter in the Bible. That distinction may belong to the Apostle John in the 1st chapter of Revelation. John was a very old man by the time he received this vision. He had walked with Jesus for 3 years. He had leaned against Jesus at the Last Supper. He had stood at the foot of the cross and watched Jesus die. He had been in the room when the risen Jesus appeared to the disciples after the resurrection. He had eaten breakfast on a beach with Jesus. Of all the people who ever lived, John had more intimate, sustained experience with the divine presence than perhaps anyone else. And he had been living with that experience for 60+ years by the time he was exiled to Patmos. Then he turned around and saw one like a son of man, the glorified post-resurrection ascended Christ, revealed in his full nature. And here is what John saw: a figure with hair white as wool, as white as snow, eyes like blazing fire, feet like bronze glowing in a furnace, a voice like the sound of rushing waters, like Niagara Falls, and every ocean wave and every river on earth speaking simultaneously. In his right hand, 7 stars. Out of his mouth came a sharp, double-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in all its full strength at midday. The man who had eaten fish with Jesus on a beach, who had leaned on Jesus at dinner, who knew the sound of Jesus' laughter, and had walked beside him in dusty sandals for 3 years. This man, when he encountered the full, unveiled reality of who Jesus actually was, fell at his feet as though dead, not overwhelmed with warmth and joy, not overcome with gentle peace, as though dead. His body completely gave way. He collapsed as if he had been killed by what he saw. And Jesus reached down and touched him and said, "Do not be afraid." There it is again. The Psalm 2 words, the emergency instruction, not the opening of a pleasant conversation, the stabilizing command given to a person who has just been physiologically destroyed by contact with divine reality. This pattern is consistent across every genuine angelic encounter in Scripture. When the angel Gabriel appeared to the priest Zechariah in the temple to announce that his wife Elizabeth would have a son, Zechariah was gripped with fear, and the angel had to immediately say, "Do not be afraid." When Gabriel appeared to Mary to announce the conception of Jesus, Mary was greatly troubled by his words and wondered what kind of greeting this could be, and Gabriel had to say, "Do not be afraid." When an angel appeared to the shepherds in the fields outside Bethlehem on the night of Jesus' birth, the text says they were terrified, and the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid." When the angel rolled away the stone at the tomb of Jesus on resurrection morning, and the guards saw him, they shook and became like dead men.
The description is the same as what happened to John on Patmos. The presence of this being was so overwhelming that trained Roman soldiers fell as though dead. Every single encounter, every single time, fear first. Do not be afraid second. Not because these beings were trying to frighten anyone, but because the gap between what a human nervous system was built for and what these beings actually are is so vast that the human body defaults to crisis mode before the mind can process what it is seeing. This raises a question that is worth sitting with carefully. If the servants of God, the beings who stand in His presence and carry out His purposes in the created order, are so far beyond ordinary human capacity to encounter without complete physical collapse, what does that tell us about God Himself? If the beings who stand before His throne, who cry out, "Holy, holy, holy," in his presence without ceasing, who cover their faces with their wings before him, are this overwhelming to human perception. What must the unfiltered presence of God be like? The prophet Isaiah found out. In chapter 6, he saw the Lord seated on the throne, high and exalted. The train of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim, 6-winged beings of fire, hovered above him, and they were calling to one another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory." And at the sound of their voices, the doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. And Isaiah's immediate response was not joy or peace or a warm feeling. He said, "Woe to me! I am ruined. I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty." Ruined. The sight of God, even mediated through this vision, was enough to make Isaiah feel that he was undone, destroyed, finished. Not because God was hostile to Isaiah, but because holiness of that magnitude, purity and glory and existence of that density is more than the human form was built to absorb. The cherubim covered their faces. The seraphim covered their faces. John fell as though dead. Isaiah said, "I am ruined." Daniel fell prostrate. Ezekiel fell on his face. Zechariah was gripped with fear. The shepherds were terrified. The soldiers became like dead men. And yet, in every one of these encounters, the first thing the divine messenger said was the same: "Do not be afraid." Which means the whole terrifying encounter was not meant to destroy. It was meant to communicate, to deliver a message, to open a door, to announce something. The fear was the natural consequence of the encounter, not the purpose of it. And every one of these messengers, from the burning bush to the empty tomb, was carrying news that was worth being afraid first and then hearing. Perhaps the way we have domesticated angels in our culture, the way we have turned the terrifying messengers of an infinite God into soft, comforting, decorative figures, says something about how we have also softened our understanding of the God they serve. Because a God who is served by beings like the ones Ezekiel and Isaiah and John encountered, a God before whom even the cherubim cover their faces and cry out, "Holy," without ceasing, is not a God who can be casually approached without cost, without preparation, without trembling. He is a God who reaches toward human beings with infinite patience and love, but who remains, in his essential nature, the one before whom the greatest beings in the universe fall on their faces. And when his messengers tell you not to be afraid, it is worth asking yourself honestly whether the reason you are not afraid is because you have received comfort from God, or because you have never truly encountered what those messengers were pointing toward.